Hey everybody, Big Toad here, and welcome back to my studio. In this video, we will continue working on that giant 6 foot by 3 foot painting of an Idaho butte and foothills, and we're going to focus on some trees and sagebrush in the foreground. Let's go ahead and get started. I've already blocked in the tree trunks in an earlier video. Now I'm going to start putting in some of the foliage in the trees. And I did a recent video on mixing greens, and so I show you how in there I mix a lot of the greens. I've also incorporated a new color or two into my green mixtures. So I've used yellow ochre and ultramarine blue for my base greens. It's a nice deep dark green that you can work off of. And then by mixing in some Naples yellow, I can alter the hue of that green in a couple different ways. And I can also bring in a little bit of cad yellow light and cad yellow mediums. And with that combination, I get a lot of colors. And then I go ahead and bring in some cobalt blue. So 2 blues, cobalt blue and ultramarine blue. And I also then bring in 3 yellows, considering yellow ochre is a yellow, and then Naples yellow, and cad yellow light, cad yellow medium. I guess that's 4 yellows. And that's my base colors I use in this video. I'm zoomed in here now so you can see me start bringing in color into the trees. And I am using smaller strokes here to put the first layer of the trees. And part of the reason I do that is I want to have a considerable amount of sky holes through the trees. I want them to feel as though the light's passing through quite a bit. So I'm laying in some of the dark greens here to create that base upon which then to build out the lighter greens and create some texture, some movement, and roundness or depth to the trees themselves. I don't want them to look flat. I want them to look like they have depth and contour. So I start out with the darker greens first, laying those in. And I want to create the effect of having sort of where the tree trunk splits and sections of that branching off in various different directions rather than one big clump of leaves. So yeah, I have 4 different yellows that I'm using here, which is a lot of yellows. I admit that. The yellow ochre is, I believe, a very important one for most painters, especially if you're doing landscapes. It's a very earthy yellow, and I use a lot of yellow ochre in this painting. Right behind the tree that I'm working on now, you see that's almost pure yellow ochre laid in there, mixed in with a little Naples yellow here and there to lighten it up. Yellow ochre was, if you remember, it was my base color that I used to tint the entire board. And I've used a lot of yellow ochre throughout this painting. And most of my paintings, I use yellow ochre. Naples yellow is a new color I'm introducing into this painting. I've never really used it before this, but I knew that it was going to be an important hue within this painting. It just seemed like a great time to bring in that Naples yellow, that lower chroma, lighter yellow. And it's been invaluable so far. In paintings before this, I've utilized my other yellows and titanium white to kind of mix down to a Naples type yellow. So, but in this one, it saved me a lot of mixing to just get the tube of Naples yellow. And I'm going to keep that in my palette box in my supplies from now on because I just like it. I like yellows, and a lot of the Idaho landscape where I live incorporates a lot of yellows into it, so it just makes a good fit. Then as I was saying, my other 2 yellows, cad yellow light and cad yellow medium, they're nice, brilliant, high chroma colors to really pull some yellows in, and I like those colors a lot as well. I love using them when I'm doing flowers and when I want a really bright yellow. So I'll probably maintain 4 yellows in my supplies. And who knows, I might test out some others and replace them. Eventually, I'd like to find replacements maybe for the cadmium colors that I use. Cadmium being one of the types of paints that, if you want to call them toxic, they have more toxicity than like a Naples yellow or a yellow ochre. So if you can get the cadmiums out of your supplies, you're probably better off in the long run, especially if you're a young painter starting out and you're going to be painting for the next 40 years. Removing the cadmiums from your supplies could be helpful for health wise moving forward. Getting back to the painting, I'm using the same technique on these 3 trees on the right as I'm using on the left. And I'm bouncing back between them because as I pull in different various colors, I move back and forth between the trees in order to take advantage of the paint that's on my brush and I've mixed on my palette. So again, laying in the darker colors to get the darker, deeper shadows in the back of a tree. All trees are actually pretty dark when you look at them. Your eye is automatically drawn to the brighter colors in trees, and it almost, until you think about it, you don't register that there's a lot of dark colors in trees. Now I shift down and also work on the sagebrush the same way. Now sagebrush can be tricky because they kind of fool the eye. Sometimes they look very dark and green, and sometimes they have a lot of bluish hues to them, and maybe even some purple, violet type colors within them as well. Um, Often you'll hear them referred to as purple sage because of the purples that can be in them. I've got a lot of videos and photographs of sagebrush just to use as reference, and maybe I'll pop some of those up um, in a video coming up as I fine tune those sagebrush. So with the trees and the sagebrush, this first video, I get them laid in, and I get towards the end of this, you'll see me bring in a lot of lighter, brighter hues of yellows and greens to finish off these trees. And I say finish, I mean finish for this session. I reserve the right, and I can already tell you I'm going to come back in and touch up these trees after this video. And probably work on them some more, because as I work through the painting and incorporate various different aspects of grasses and highlights, I like to move those colors around the painting so that I don't use a color in only one place. If I use it on a tree, I want to also move it to grasses. If I use it in grasses, I want to move it to trees and bring some into the sky. I want to notice the height of my trees. I'm bringing them up so they cut through the mountain and also touch the sky a little bit, to just break up the line of the ridge top of the mountain, and it ties then the sky to the trees as well, which then ties to the mountain, which then ties to the foreground. And so crossing these planes with an object like a tree or a telephone pole or something like that, breaking those planes or those various viewpoints and depths of your painting creates more depth. The pushes the mountains back by bringing these trees up in front of them, and see I'm bringing that tree right up into the sky as well. That creates depth when you can take one object and paint it and build it out in front of the various layers. So you've got your background, which is the mountains, sky. You've got your midground, which is those hills in the distance, and you got the foreground, which is where these trees are. So think about that when you're doing your compositions and you're out plein air painting. So that you feel the freedom to make changes in order to break up and put something cutting across all those different layers to create that illusion of depth. Now I had to make a conscious decision on how I was going to paint these trees. Was I going to block them in with big chunks of color and then paint sky holes in at the end, or was I going to build them out in this way? Some painters would avoid this approach. This would maybe make their paintings feel less loose, and you'll hear a lot of painters talk about painting loosely. They don't want to be too stiff in their painting, and that is a reality of painting. You don't want to look too stiff. Stiff painting can look too cartoony, too I don't know. It can look too amateurish, so you have to be careful of that. But I believe there's sometimes a balance in that. You do want some detail that may seem and look stiff, but mixed in with other loose brush strokes and paint within the painting, it can actually create a more natural look to it as well, and can help you focus in on focal areas like the tree. So, be aware that you want to paint loosely and the effect of loose, but also take advantage of more precise painting within the larger loose painting in order to create those focal points and to draw attention. It's a delicate balance in my mind, and I like to incorporate both into a painting. And that really brings us to the topic of style and finding your style of painting. And I want to caution you on a couple things about finding your style. Sometimes in the search for a style, we give up growing in a particular area, and we use the excuse, well, that's my style. It's my style to always paint stiffly, or it's my style to just paint so overwhelmingly loosely that I never have to worry about detail. It's my style. And really think about, is that a style, or is that just a decision not to grow in your painting abilities? No matter how loose or stiff I paint, I'm always exploring other methods and techniques. You'll see me paint trees in different ways. These are a little more detailed and precise, but again, this is a very, very large painting, and I don't want to just, I don't want to use a house brush to paint the whole painting. I'm not Bob Ross. That's not my style. um, but I'm also incorporating loose brush strokes throughout this painting. So don't use style as an excuse to stop growing as a painter. And also don't get stagnant in your style, especially, earlier in your painting career. You don't want to become stagnant and not allow for growth. Think about it. Don't let the word style hinder you from growth or be an excuse to growth. Don't seek out to be always so loose that you never do detail and you avoid it, as well as don't say, well, it's my style to be overly detailed on everything, and then you never grow and never explore other techniques. So it's great to formulate a style, but it should be a subconscious expression of who you are rather than a decision not to grow. So as you can see, I've been incorporating lighter greens into this based off the colors that I've already talked about. And it's creating depth within my tree. It's creating contour within my tree. I think you can see at this point how starting with the darker greens and then laying the lighter greens over them worked really well. Again, the dark greens are going to be deep inside the tree in life, in the real world. The dark greens are way back in there under the canopy of the leaves. And then as you move out from the center of the tree, that's where you start picking up the lighter colors. Now, as I do this, we've been talking about style, we've been talking about loose painting and detail. And I am using, even though this looks detailed, I am using loose painting styles and techniques within these trees. You can tell by how I'm holding the brush. It's hard to paint detail when you're holding the brush in this overhand or fencing type hold. If you hold your brush always like a pencil, you are going to be probably always painting too much detail. So be aware of how you hold your brush and practice both ways until they both feel natural. I find, interestingly enough, that on a larger painting, I tend to hold my brush more often in this method of the fencing type hold or the overhand hold rather than the pencil hold, just because the size of the painting, I don't know, it just is more conducive. Another thing on the shading and dark side, remember where my light's coming from. The sun is to the right. Again, I'm facing this mountain from the west. So I'm trying to put more highlights on the left, or excuse me, on the right side of the tree and leave some of the darks more to the left. And I'm treating some of these as like I said, the tree is branched off in multiple different directions, and I'm hoping I'm capturing that and showing you that where you can see that maybe there's after it breaks off, there's maybe 3 or 4 main trunks that come up and create some separation in that tree. I think that's a natural way to paint this type of tree, and I like it. And I think it creates some vitality. Again, I really love the sky holes I'm getting through here using this approach to painting this tree. It does create lots of opportunity for the background and the mountain and the sky to poke through. Also, look at the contrast between in the sky holes between the tree and the midground. It's just enough contrast where you know you're looking through the tree, even though I'm using a lot of the same colors, especially in these lighter greens. They're really the same value as the background, but still you see the separation because of a lot of the darker colors I've used. And again, I don't hesitate like I'm doing now to bring in some dark colors later to bring it back in to re-emphasize some of the dark areas. And I dip back into some lighter greens there, or touching more closer to the yellows to, again, add more depth. Using a lot of different colors in these trees. But I just feel like in a painting this large, it requires more colors because I'm painting such a larger area, and I don't want to just can't paint big blotches. So I'm using a broken color technique within the trees and using lots of different colors, and I I think it's working well. I also use impasto techniques when I do all of my paintings. I don't I don't know. I don't let my paint dry very often. When I did the original tinting of the panel, yes, I let that dry. I wanted that to be a solid dried color. But it's really noticeable in doing his trees. I'm doing this in one session, and I'm going from the darks all the way through various hues to the lighter and brighter, more chroma colors. And a lot of times I'm using the same brush through the entire process. I'm not letting anything dry. I'm not afraid to do that. I'm not worried about that. I don't mind mixing my colors right on the canvas or the board as I'm doing it. In fact, it's more comfortable for me to paint this way with that impasto approach. More color, more paint on my brush, and allowing it to mix. I'm not, not overly blending my colors when I do this. In fact, I don't like it when they blend too much, and you'll see me go over a place because I don't like over blended colors. But and this takes practice and familiarity with your colors and what they'll do, and learning how to load that brush. But it becomes very quick and second nature to you. So if you're afraid, if you always are waiting for your paintings to dry in order to go to the next stage, just ask yourself, is that because that is necessary for the effect you're after? to let it dry completely before you go to the next phase of your painting? Because that's a legitimate reason. If it's the effect requires you to go and let it dry before you go back in, completely understandable. And I do that sometimes. But if you're always waiting for your paintings to dry because you're afraid to continue painting, maybe it's time to explore some impasto techniques and get familiar with that. And you can speed up your painting process and uh, maybe expand your style, learn some more about painting, create some new effects and methods and techniques that you can use, and just expand your repertoire of painting skills and abilities. So I like to be honest with myself. Am I waiting for my paint to dry because I'm afraid to move forward, or is it really necessary for the look and technique I'm using? And likewise, the opposite. Am I so comfortable with an impasto method that I'm afraid to let it dry? Because honestly, I'd rather paint right into the impasto method, right into other colors at almost all occasions. And so I've asked myself, why is that? Is it because I'm just so comfortable doing it, I don't want to do it the other way, or is it going to give me the effects I'm after? So what I'm talking about here is that self-awareness to your motives for what you're doing, and being self-aware as an artist. I think it's important, and it's also in every aspect of your life. Being self-aware, taking a moment to analyze why you're doing what you're doing, is going to help you grow as an individual in any skill set, any knowledge area, in relationships, in work, in play, in sports, in painting, in artistry of music. It doesn't matter what part of your life it is. Being self-aware, being able to self-reflect and look honestly at yourself to judge what's holding you back, where can you improve, how do you need to change yourself in order to get better. It's a critical skill that's just going to help you in life. So don't mean to be too preachy, but if you want to be a great painter, you have to be self-aware. You have to self-reflect. So working on these trees over here on the right, they're a little further back away than the tree on the left, so I don't want to show quite as much detail. I can paint them a little looser. The contrast between the three trees, your eyes are gonna play a trick on you, and you're gonna look at that and say, where does one tree end and the other start? In some places that'll be evident, and others it won't be, and that's good because in nature, when you have a clump of trees, sometimes it's hard to tell which leaves are attached to which tree. So in your paintings, sometimes that's the same thing. Where does one tree start and the other one end? Again, sometimes make it obvious, like I'm using this light color to go over the top of the tree in the middle, so that you can tell. And other places it's not so clear, and that's perfectly acceptable. It's kind of like that lost edge between the trees or the bushes or the grasses. It sometimes you want it to be evident, and sometimes it's okay for it to be less so because that's the way nature is. All right, so these trees I think are getting some nice shape and depth and roundness to them, and I'm liking them. All again using the various different hues of greens, leaning towards from the dark greens, leaning up towards almost the yellows, and even maybe a hint of cad yellow light or medium here and there. So the sagebrush, as I was mentioning earlier, can be tricky because of the various hues of grays and violets or purples and greens in them. They can sometimes appear very dark and deep. And it's funny, you get a field of sagebrush far away and they can look really dark, but then you get up close and they shift to some more grays and some very drab greens. It's sagebrush are tricky and so diverse, and they're very chaotic in how they grow. They can grow very lopsided, very round. They can just about any crazy shape you can think of. They can assume that position and shape. So you want to be careful not to create a bunch of round sagebrush if you're going to do sagebrush. It's just not the reality. They're just not a uniform tree or a bush. They're not well groomed. They are scraggly. They are clumpy. They are jagged. And the same with their trunks. Their trunks can be grayish as well and have some purple hues in them. You see right here, I shifted to throwing some paint on the fence posts. And fence posts are really interesting as well because in photos or while you're driving on the road, they can look very, very dark. So you have to maintain some darkness, but they can also be very grayish and bleached out because of the sun. It all depends on how the sun's hitting them. And so I take a lot of different colors whenever I come up with a dark color. I'll put it on a few fence posts, see how it looks. I'm looking for that color in the fence post that's going to make it pop, but yet still make it feel natural, like it fits into the painting. So I experiment there on the fence posts. And all throughout this painting process, I'll be dabbing colors on the fence posts and looking for just that the right hues and the right shadows and shapes and colors to just really fit in well with the painting. The fence posts are very important to creating depth in this painting as they run alongside the road. And the fence posts will typically always be the same height or within a couple inches of each other. But because of the contour of the land and as they move further away, they get shorter and smaller. You have to take these things into consideration in order to create perspective and keep your painting lined up with perspective. And of course, perspective is critical to creating realistic looking paintings or paintings that, even if they're abstract, it's still critical in your style. A couple things about perspective. One is if things get further away, they get shorter. That's why you see the height of my, or they get smaller. I mean, that's why you see the height of my fence posts getting shorter as they get further away. And also things become hazy. That's atmospheric perspective. The further things are away, the less detail you can see. The colors get washed out a little bit. In other words, the brights become less bright and the darks become less dark. And things begin to settle in the middle. That's atmospheric perspective. And then, of course, size perspective. Like I said, things are going to get smaller, look smaller the further they are away. And these are things to always consider when you're pulling together your compositions and creating a painting that settles in for the eye. If you get your perspective wrong, you're not going to be able to get depth. You're not going to be able to get contour. The viewer will be confused even if they're not sure why and how. Now we're almost done with this video, but what I'm doing here is I'm reestablishing some of the darker colors into my trees. And that creates a nice depth and contour to them. I think it's a nice effect. Reestablishing those dark colors. Sometimes you just have to go back in and fix what you've done. So I'm about done here in this session. I'm not done with the trees though. I'll be working some more on the trees and probably a little bit on the foreground in the next video. So for now, thanks for joining me in this video. I appreciate it. Those who watched it all the way to the end. This is the Big Toad, and I am out.